Κυρίες και κύριοι, καλημέρα. Θα ήθελα να ευχαριστήσω πρώτα απ' όλα Δόκτωρα τον Βριασόπουλο, τον Κώστα, για την ειδική πρόσκληση που κατέβηκα στην Αθήνα μετά από 5 χρόνια. Και έχω την ευκαιρία να ξεκινήσω να μιλήσω ελληνικά, αλλά θα συνεχίσω την presentation μου στα αγγλίζικα, αφού έχουμε διεθνής audience. I represent global British pricing agency, Argus, and I'm coming from Russia and former Soviet Union. I'm head of Russia and former Soviet Union region. Many of you know that we do oil prices and we do commodities prices on the physical market. And the most important thing for all the discussions is the level of price for commodity, and especially for crude, because it drives all the processes and investments and upstream projects. We just had a brief discussion during the break with some participants that just a few years ago there was a perception that oil price wouldn't go lower than $60 per barrel because this is just justification for the oil production costs. And everybody was so confident that the oil prices will start grow over the $150 per barrel. But now we live in very difficult environment, and especially the production units, the oil companies, and natural gas producers. They go through very tough period actually, and the oil prices are, the level is much lower than everybody predicted and expected. But my topic is actually, I would like to go briefly through the situation with Russian crude oil production and exports. And I think it's very important because Russia supplies probably 30% of the global and the total European consumption. And it remains Russian Urals export crude grade remains very important for the European refineries, for European buyers to retain and to have robust business and to retain the refinery margins because Russian crude, Urals, in terms of quality and other characteristics and economic background is very important actually for European consumption, European supply options. Just know how it works. Sorry. Yeah. So we have to look at the current situation with production, which is much more positive than everybody expected. And Russia hit the historical record from 2015, reaching the post-Soviet Union records in production. And you see the chart with the bars that show monthly production. The decline of the February production and for the last 3 months comes from the agreement that Russia reached with Saudi Arabia and other OPEC members to cut the production. And this move was actually agreed just a few years before, but the parties and the producers couldn't start implementing the agreements. But now we see that there is a discipline, so there is a quite strong performance in terms of cutting the production from both sides, and we expect that in a week period the OPEC members and Russian representatives will come to Vienna to continue the freeze and the cuts for the rest of the year, which probably could drive prices to the higher level. But still, Russia has more capacity to produce oil on the level of 11.2.3 million barrels a day, which is again historical record. And some periods there was a number one producer in the world since the crisis of 2014. What drives Russian exports and Russian production? This is a changing tax regime. Just briefly, the lines show you the level of export. So it's taxed by implementing so-called export duties, which Russian government calculates on the daily basis. But decides the change every 15th of month for the next month actually period, and it comes that August Urals data prices are the only source of information for Russian government to calculate the level of export duty. The formula is indicated on the bottom of this slide. So the changes in the taxation drive, I would be very briefly going through the slide actually. The changes in the taxation for the last, it was so-called tax maneuver, drive Russian producers to export more crude rather than refine it domestically, because the tax system actually pushes more crude out of the country, and it's more economically more attractive solution actually to run this business, especially for the vertically integrated companies that operate in Russia, in the Russian oil and gas sector. So this situation actually moved Russian refineries to stay with lower margins, and the light blue bars show you the less attractiveness of Russian refining sector and economically, as I said, the tax regime actually pushes more crude for exports rather than keep it and sell it to the local refiners, and this situation probably will continue. Again, all the factors I mentioned drive now the Russian crude exports to the historical record as well. So you see just monthly data from 2015 that we have this April this year, the light blue bars actually. Again, it's on the historical record since Soviet Union collapse, and we expect that even with the lower production, the exports will remain very steady and very robust on all the destinations. I should mention that just talking about Urals market, we probably shouldn't be focused only on the Mediterranean or Northwest Europe. If we're talking and we're analyzing Russian crude outlook, so we have to consider the quite robust and very fast development of Russian eastern route, which is called East Siberia Pacific Ocean, ESPO. This is new crude grade. It's a light crude, and the fields are being developed by Russian companies actually, and it pushes more crude to the east, and especially I show a few slides later that this is the most attractive destination for Russian companies to export crude, and China drives the demand actually quite and is quite important buyer of Russian crude on this section. So this is crude export from both east and west. So the blue part of the bars is the Russian Urals, and the red part is this new crude grade, which is called ESPO. And you see that for the last 7-6 years, it's been developing very rapidly, and it becomes more and more important for Russian crude balance for supply options. This is the system actually that was designed and constructed 10 years ago, and since 2009 they started to ship Russian crude to the eastern destination, and there are two sections of it. So the first section comes to the Russian newly built Vladivostok port Kozmino, which is operating now in very high level of density, with every month adding more and more cargoes. And the other section comes straight forward to China from Kozmino-Mohe junction. I could show you this. And adding more and more supply to Chinese market. This is a picture that shows us the supply that grows from the growing production, especially in the Eastern Siberian fields. And Rosneft, Russian major Rosneft, is the leader in producing the ESPO crude and exporting as well. So the light blue bars show you the increase of the production for the last 3 years. Because of the increasing production, Russian companies that produce Russian crude ESPO need more capacity, an additional capacity for transportation. And it drives Russian crude pipeline monopoly Transneft to design and start developing the additional capacity to the pipeline system, which is called, again, ESPO, I showed you previously. And the numbers I showed here in the slide are quite impressive, and they're going to finalize it by 2020, adding like 40% of additional capacity to the existing pipeline system. This is exports from Russian Far Eastern port Kozmino, and the bars show you, and the numbers show you the number of cargoes being shipped on the monthly basis to different destinations. So the ESPO crude, the Russian new blend ESPO crude actually is being priced against Dubai crude, but it gives premium to the Dubai quotations. And there are already some ideas in the market actually to think about pricing independently the ESPO crude, and ESPO crude has quite high opportunity to become new Far Eastern benchmark on crude pricing. These are the destinations of ESPO crude supplies for the last 2 years. So of course the largest volumes are allocated to the Chinese market, and the key drivers are so-called independent refineries or tea kettles, but they are not really in that level as we used to have for the European refineries. In China, regular tea kettle may refine like 10 million tons a year. So China's stagely privatizing the sector. They're giving more and more licenses for private business actually to process crude and to buy export volumes. And Russia has become the key supplier to the independent Chinese refineries for the last 3 years. The other destinations are Japan and South Korea as well. And then Russian ESPO crude goes to every particular destination, including the west coast of United States for economic reasons, because sometimes it's more for American refineries located on the west coast. It's much more economically attractive to buy Russian crude rather than process the local one. And the key advantage of this emerging market is actually that the crude is being produced and delivered in very short distance. So say for Japan it takes 1 day to deliver the cargo actually, and for China it's like 2 days to the southeast ports and southeastern refineries. So that's just brief outlook of Russian crude production and exports. I will be happy to participate in the Q&A session and answer questions if you have such. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.